The main reason why I'm no longer going to use a dedicated idol dancing evaluation system is the degree to which stylistic norms for girl group choreography have changed in the past couple years. I got into K-pop mid-2019, and at the time, girl group choreography appeared so completely detached from surrounding trends in open style that I felt there must be a unique origin. That's why in the summer of 2020, I made a two-part series called What is Idol Dancing?, where I attempted to trace the roots of mainstream girl group choreography. I eventually stumbled across a type of Japanese club dancing, Pirapara, which saw its popularity climax from the 1980s to the 1990s and can be identified by a heavy focus on arm moves. The lower body is an obvious afterthought, with no real shifts in posture and simple, stepping legs. Pirapara was injected into Japanese idol groups for its catchiness, and the aesthetic was likely transmitted to the K-pop industry from there. In those videos, I identified two general types of choreography done by various generations of idol groups. The first general type was simplified hip-hop dancing, modeled after Motown's performers. This simplified hip-hop dancing was done by not only men but also women in the first and second generations. SES's I'm Your Girl and 2NE1's Come Back Home are two choreographies that come to mind. The second general type was what I called idol dancing. I defined idol dancing as a form of dance that is urban dance adjacent, made distinct by the influence of Pirapara dancing, especially in female choreography. Dalla Dalla by ITZY, Fancy by Twice, and Umpa Umpa by Red Velvet demonstrate that Pirapara influenced movement was mainstream until about 2019. Flash forward to 2022, and we see a drastically different choreographic landscape in K-pop. While the gap between open style and girl group choreography has not been completely eliminated like it has been with boy groups, it is closing. Let's take the quintessential girl group Twice as an example. Fancy indubitably draws influence from Pirapara. The emphasis is on the arm moves, their legs are kept busy by only walking and hopping for the most part, and the musicality is very counts-based. In contrast, the chorus of their 2022 comeback icon is accompanied by a routine entirely composed of elements you could find in open-style choreography, such as kicks, sideways lunges, powerful arm moves, and most importantly, the subtle yet consistent presence of groove. There's some choreographies that have gone even further than icon and become practically indistinguishable from open-style dance numbers. Hireland's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Idol's My Bad, just to name a few. I think that part of the reason for the increasingly strong open-style feeling of both girl and boy group choreography is that the line between the dance and idol industries has been steadily fading in recent years. It's plausible to assume that the 2021 South Korean dance reality show Street Woman Fighter played a significant role drawing the two worlds closer by putting Shiaeon in with the contestants and casting Boa and Taeyong as judges. Nowadays, we not only get behind-the-scenes clips, but full-on dance practices with the choreographers. Backup dancers are getting their own fancams and doing Mnet's relay dances. Because K-pop choreography is recorded as part of the choreographer's entire body of work with more transparency, companies are encouraged to allow much of the dancer's stylistic groove and intricacies to persist until the final version. Versatility as a dancer refers to whether or not you've built technique that is applicable in a wide range of choreography and styles. It can't be measured by just counting the number of styles you've trained in, although a diverse training background does help to some extent. For example, Naeun is a versatile dancer because her technique is well-rounded. She can perform the work of many choreographers without any awkwardness. The same can be said for Choi Young-joon. On the other hand, we have dancers like Emma Song or Sean Liu, who are just as amazing, but who lean so heavily into a specific niche that they can present a slightly inconsistent level across different types of movement. Emma Song has incredible fluid isolations and a unique way of creating dynamics, but she isn't practiced at creating stops, so she can lack clarity. Sean Liu's footwork and lines are insanely good, but he's developed a way of dancing that avoids pops and strength-based movement as much as possible. The consequence is that his moves can look a bit weak in fast hip-hop choreography. Less balanced, highly stylized dancers often look a bit unrefined outside of their niche of movement, and sometimes that includes the choreography typical of current boy groups and or girl groups. I do want to make clear that varying levels of refinement across different choreographies is not the same thing as being unable to do them. The dancers I used as examples above obviously needed to acquire a lot of general skill in order to become so well developed within their niche. Lack of versatility only becomes a problem when a person is not highly stylized due to specialization, but due to the fact that they are still developing as a dancer. However, I'm hesitant to call it out as a problem when analyzing idols because it is a natural process of growth that I don't want to demonize. We should expect to see aspects of a dancer's technique improve at different rates. This is why Ginny looks so much better dancing press in comparison to Thunderous, for example, and it's also why fans should stop shouting regression every time a young, developing dancer doesn't perform equally in every single piece of choreography they are given. Now that we have a grasp of versatility and how it functions, the reasonable question to ask is this: why is there a section for supposed idol dancers at all? Even girl group choreography requires open style or street dance training to execute, and any pattern of inconsistency we see between an idol's execution of their group's choreography and the stuff they do outside, like covering boy group choreography, can be attributed to a lack of versatile technique which can happen between any styles. Look at Rosalind, who is a professional dancer stronger at open style choreography aimed at girl groups than archetypical hip hop. To explain why I believe that distinguishing idol dancers is still useful, I need to switch from founding my argument on step vocabulary as I have done in the past, and instead examine the ideological difference between open style choreography and idol choreography. Dance for the purpose of artistic expression always at some level is motivated by a desire to demonstrate more and more skill. Faster turns, more complex footwork, increasingly minuscule isolations. Dancers pursue physical virtuosity not despite dance being an art, but precisely because it is one. The goal is for a dancer's ideas to be able to spill out into their body in the most eloquent way possible, and creating a vast movement vocabulary of difficult skills is what allows this to happen. Technique is often thought of as the anatomical principles one has to follow in order to move with enough efficiency to do difficult skills, but technique is also made up of a second, more subjective component. Different styles have different techniques because they are based on different ideas of what the aesthetic of movement should be. The aesthetic is closely tied to the values that founded the genre. The aristocratic values of ballet led to a technique centered around length, grace, and geometry and can be contrasted with the technique of hip-hop dance that emphasizes relaxation, as opposed to the consistent tension of ballet, and individuality because of its roots in hip-hop values. I would argue that dance within the idol context is meant to achieve three main goals. 1. To demonstrate synchronization. 2. To allow for the possibility of live singing, whether the idols actually sing live or not. And 3. To foster an illusion of personal communication between the idol and the fan. The last 2 points are especially relevant to girl groups, who seem to preserve the aesthetic of gestural dancing to a much greater extent than boy groups. Part of the way they accomplish that is by removing the distracting aspects of dancing, the complex, powerful technical displays. This starts with the actual steps in the choreography, but it extends to the way the steps are executed as well. You'll notice that the way N-Mix dances the chorus of Tank is radically different from the way Na-In dances it. Though part of that difference is due to a gap in technical skill level, I wouldn't be surprised if someone at JIT has told N-Mix to lower the intensity. All of this is, in essence, a series of layered measures intended to prevent the reaction K-pop fans have when they perceive someone to be overdancing. I want to reiterate here that we are not looking for step-related differences between idol choreography and open style, for there are none, but rather a qualitative gap. I've identified the causes of this gap using two terms, verticality and simplicity. I'm using verticality here to describe dancing where the weight is evenly distributed between 2 feet with the body stacked above. This is a direct contradiction with hip-hop and its adjacent genres, brilliantly characterized by choreographer and scholar Susan Lee Foster as an off-balanced and rest-oriented investigation of the body's capacity for movement. It's also why it makes sense to evaluate certain idols separately, but not musical theater dancers, for example. Musical theater dancing is strongly rooted in ballet, an already vertical dance genre, and so transferring it into a theater context where live singing restrains the dancer's movements does nothing to challenge the base technical principles of that genre like it does when open style is transferred into the idol context. The word simplicity in this context is self-explanatory. Girl group choreography tends to be relatively restrained. For instance, Universe, created for NCT, looks about 20 times harder than Step Back, created for Girls on Top, and both were choreographed by Rihanna. The verticality and simplicity of girl group choreography / dancing supports the pursuit of synchronization by making the steps mostly attainable for every group member and prevents the intensity of the dancing from overshadowing a suggestion of live singing and direct fan connection. All these things coalesce, the emphasis on synchronization over individuality, the anti-over-dancing measures, the vertical and simple choreography, to create a space for a unique dancer who would not survive in a context where dance was the sole focus. I would describe these dancers as being neat. These neat dancers represent what correct execution of girl group choreography would look like. However, major areas of lack become visible once these dancers leave the realm of girl group choreography, and that is because neatness can be accomplished without groove, power, dynamics, or an expansive use of space. 3 things that are absolutely vital to street dance and open style. I will summarize the ways in which neat idol dancers appear lacking in non-girl group dance choreography with the phrase so-and-so dances small as opposed to dancing big, which is what one wants in contexts where dance takes center stage. There's another reason why I want to single out idol dancers. When I discussed versatility earlier, I left out a unique thing that happens when many open-style dancers attempt girl group choreography. Dancers shrink their movement in order to capture the gestural quality of girl group choreography / dancing. As a result, their isolations and coordination, which have been cultivated under the condition of dancing big for the entire duration of their training, tend to become weak. At the same time, stylized aspects of technique, or even poor alignment to an extent, which are usually cushioned and fleshed out with groove and power, become overwhelming. This is why some dancers appear more messy doing girl group choreography than boy group choreography. Idol dancer as a category is useful because of idols like Heewon. Within NMIX's choreography, she demonstrates the most consistent isolations and coordination within the group. However, based on her freestyles and execution of hard carry, she would have ended up in Tier 7, and I believe that to be an inaccurate assessment overall. It's valuable and informative to point out what it looks like when someone's body control is acclimated to dancing small instead of simply disregarding them as weak dancers. Not all forms of dancing small look the same though. I've classified Ryujin as an idol dancer because she dances small in her aversion to groove and her underuse of space, but her ability to add pops puts her on the borderline. As a whole, the varying technical makeups of the idols I've put in the idol dancer category make creating an airtight definition impossible. This is where something called the prototype theory becomes useful. The prototype theory states that a concept cannot be sorted into a category by means of a rigid checklist of required features, and its placement should instead be based on whether or not the concept in question is a central or peripheral example of said category. The more readily the concept pops into your brain when a category is mentioned, the more central it is. To go in the opposite direction, a concept can become so distanced from your intuitive idea of what belongs in that category that it takes up an ambiguous residence between categories, a phenomenon known as fuzzy edges. This entire spectrum of central and peripheral examples is called graded membership. The system of graded membership will only be used to sort dancers who show high proficiency when executing girl group choreography. Below a certain threshold of technique, a dancer's strengths are relatively unclear. Idols without a lot of dance experience lack power, not because they've renounced it in favor of neatness, but because they don't have the technique to be powerful or neat. I think it's most logical to place idols in the general tier list unless I feel putting them there presents an egregiously low and inaccurate representation of their skill level during girl group choreography. I want to briefly address something that will become obvious now that male and female idols are mixed in my ranking, and that is that the average level of dance in girl groups is much lower than that of boy groups. From what I've seen, this disparity can be attributed to the fact that companies put less effort into training and scouting female dancers than male dancers. Just look at SM Entertainment. NCT and EXO are many times stronger than Red Velvet and aespa. I find this to be a very unfortunate fact about K-pop because it's not representative of the actual dance demographic I've experienced. In fact, every single dance class I've been to, including the hip-hop, locking, or house ones, are dominated by women. Teenage girls in particular are a force to be reckoned with. In a country like Japan that teaches girls to be demure homemakers, it's a very cool thing to see, especially when you don't think about how the gender split in dance classes is indicative of the way in which teenage boys are forced out of hobbies and potential artistic careers because of the pressure they face to become breadwinners. I personally think that part of what makes dance interesting is that it is one of the very few physical fields where men and women don't have to be separated due to a noticeable gap in ability. There are a lot of dance elements unrelated to speed and power, like musicality, isolations, groove, and flexibility, that mean men don't have an outright advantage in most styles. Recent girl groups and their powerful choreography gives me hope that this imbalance in K-pop is changing, but in the meantime, we'll have to live with a ranking where 9 out of 10 girl group members reside in Tier 7. Finally, I want to reiterate that any dance ranking is ultimately subjective. Although there is obviously some general consensus of what is good dancing and what is bad dancing, when it comes to the details, every dancer you ask will have a different opinion. Just as an example, D-League, a professional dance league in Japan, has started uploading a series of videos wherein each team picks their top 5 best D-League dancers, and every ranking is different. If world-class dancers can't agree, there is no hope for the rest of us. My primary intention going into any ranking video is to create a comprehensive explanation of the technique, musicality, and artistry of individual dancers. The ranking itself is always secondary.